Hello, welcome back to the breaking news update. My name is Jimmy Boyd, and you are watching Boyd News. I want to thank you so much for tuning in today. I'm back with another update coming out from the war between Russia and Ukraine, and I've got a ton of very big news to share with all of you today. So today's date is April 21st, 2025, and it's Monday. Welcome back to the channel, guys. Hope you're all ready for a wonderful week of news, and I hope you all had a great weekend and enjoyed your Easter as well. So we're going to go ahead and start off talking about this war. We've got a very big news update here on your screen. Trump admin proposes peace deal to Ukraine to end the war with Russia. The U.S. is awaiting a response from Kyiv on its peace plan proposals, particularly regarding the recognition of Crimea as Russian and Ukraine's refusal to join NATO. So, very big update today. I let you guys know just late last week, Friday and Saturday, that we would be hearing sometime this week whether Ukraine would be accepting a peace deal proposal from the U.S. to try to end this war. Also, Russia obviously has to jump on board as well and accept this. So, I'm going to give you guys some of the details talking about this, but so far we know that part of this will be Ukraine's refusal to join NATO, so Ukraine will not be able to get into NATO if they accept this deal. And also, the U.S. will be recognizing Crimea as Russian, and we talked about that last week as well. So I'll give you guys some details on that here in just a moment. We also have reports coming out from the eastern side of Ukraine near the city of Pokrovsk that the Russians are actually retreating from that area. There's a western portion close to the city of Pokrovsk where the Russians were trying to circle around and try to cut off a main highway into that city. And this is a major transport and rail hub city for Ukraine in the Donetsk region. The Russians are being pushed out from there is what we're starting to hear. So I'll show you guys that information as the Russians are now on the retreat in the Donetsk region. Also, we're going to give you some updates talking about the quote-unquote Easter truce, okay, from Russia that we heard announced last week. President Vladimir Putin of Russia announced they were going to be holding a truce with Ukraine. We know that was not the case. I gave you guys an update on Saturday that this truce was no longer valid the minute that it started, and we were still seeing attacks coming from Russia. So we'll talk about that as well as we move on. So let's go ahead and jump on to our reports over here on X. No mainstream news article to go over today. So we'll start off here with Nexta. Trump's team has proposed peace terms to Ukraine, the Wall Street Journal reports. According to sources, the conditions include recognizing Crimea as part of Russia and placing the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant under U.S. control. The U.S. suggests granting neutral status to the area surrounding the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant and putting it under Washington supervision as part of a ceasefire deal. Additionally, the U.S. could potentially recognize Crimea as Russian territory, while Ukraine would have to abandon its plans to join NATO. Washington is not proposing limits on the size of Ukraine's armed forces and does not rule out continued Western military support or the deployment of European troops in Ukraine. The proposal does not include recognition of Russian control over the 4 other occupied regions, but also does not demand that Russian forces withdraw from them. A response from Ukraine is expected later this week. What are your takes on this? Okay, so here's the report from Wall Street Journal. It says Kyiv is on the clock to respond to Trump plan to end Ukraine conflict. U.S. proposal includes recognition of Russia's annexation of Crimea and blocking Ukraine from joining NATO. Okay, so lots of major things here that are going to benefit Russia. I mean, the U.S. Just recognizing Crimea is a huge one. We know that Ukraine is not going to ever recognize these territories that Russia's taking control over. And we know they control Crimea completely. They will never recognize it as Russian territory. Same with the other territories that Russia's attacking. That's going to be a big one. That's going to be difficult for Ukraine to get past. And then in terms of Ukraine joining NATO, that's a huge one too. We know Ukraine does want to get into NATO. So I'm curious to see how they will respond to this. You guys let me know what you think regarding this proposal. But also some talk here about the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. Ukraine would have to give that up and let the U.S. take control over it. So we'll see if they accept that. And then also down here talking about Ukraine's armed forces, the size of it, there'd be no limits. Ukraine would be able to maximize the size of their military after the war comes to an end if they want to. And then Western military support to Ukraine. Ukraine could continue receiving weaponry from the West. And then also a deployment of European contingent into Ukraine to ensure their sovereignty. So those are all very big. And then talking about the Russian control over the other 4 occupied regions. Looks like the U.S. would not be recognizing that as Russian territory because obviously those regions are not even completely controlled by the Russians. So let me know what you guys think about this. Very big development coming out today. Now we'll jump on over here to military news UA. Trump hopes Ukraine and Russia will make a deal next week. Then both sides will start doing big business with the U.S., which is thriving, and they will make a fortune. Okay, so this actually came out yesterday from U.S. President Donald Trump on True Social, and he said, hopefully Russia and Ukraine will make a deal this week. Both will then start to do big business with the United States of America, which is thriving, and make a fortune. Okay, so he's also calling on Ukraine and Russia to make a deal here, end this war, and then in the end, I guess he's going to allow Ukraine and Russia to do business with America, and in the end will benefit both countries economically because obviously Russia and Ukraine both heavily suffering due to this war. So I guess it could benefit them in that aspect. But this was a statement coming out from Donald Trump just yesterday. Okay. Now for Max 24, Peskov. Putin remains open to a settlement and continues working with the U.S. Ukraine can't join NATO. It's a threat to Russia's interests, he added. Okay, these were statements coming out from Dmitry Peskov right here, standing next to Vladimir Putin. He's the Kremlin spokesman. So these were two major statements today. So apparently, Vladimir Putin is still open to working towards a settlement and working with the U.S. to try to end this war, reportedly by him and probably Vladimir Putin. And also, he stated here that Ukraine cannot join NATO, that apparently Russia was actually very happy to hear that today, is what he stated. That the U.S. stands with Ukraine not joining NATO, as that's apparently one of the major reasons why potentially this war even started to begin with. And we know Ukraine wants to get into NATO, so I'm really not sure how that's going to work out. Definitely some very big hurdles here going on, but that was an update from the Kremlin today. Now for Max 24, Putin said that we need to sort out Zelensky's proposal not to hit civilian targets. Okay, so reportedly, Zelensky coming out recently also stating that that Russia should not be attacking civilian targets, which that shouldn't be a thing anyway, right? But we've been seeing Russia just hammering civilian cities all over Ukraine and smashing apartment buildings, high-rise apartment buildings as well, just being hit repeatedly, like down in Kherson recently. We had a lot of guided aerial bombs being dropped over there. Even in Kupiansk, we had a high-rise building also being hit by a glide bomb. So, I mean, Russia's been definitely targeting civilian areas recently, and Zelensky's calling on Vladimir Putin to end those strikes on civilian targets, which, again, should not be happening anyway. Now from the Ukrainian Review, Witkoff may visit Moscow again after meetings in London, says the Wall Street Journal. The U.S. handed over to Kyiv a confidential document that outlined proposals for achieving lasting peace in Ukraine. The Russian side was also informed of the content of the document. All right, so Steve Witkoff, the special envoy of the Middle East from the U.S., representing the U.S. in talks with Russia to try to end this war. Looks like Witkoff could be going to Moscow here very soon in the next week or so after a lot of these meetings in London. And we should be hearing at first whether Ukraine and Russia is going to accept a peace deal. And then I'm assuming he'd probably head over to Russia immediately to start striking some economic deals with Russia is probably what I'm thinking, because we know right now a lot of that's on the back burner in terms of economic cooperation with Russia and the United States. So that's probably what I'm thinking would be going on after. Now from the Ukrainian Review, Russians are gradually retreating from the western outskirts of Pokrovsk after an unsuccessful attempt to cut the route from Dnipropetrovsk region, says OSUV Kortitsia. There a small turning point occurred when the Ukrainians recaptured Kotline, and now the Russians are very slowly but creeping away from there. Okay, so tons of reports coming out today on X that just on the southwestern portion over here near the city of Pokrovsk, which would be right here. Okay, this is in the Donetsk region. The Russians have been trying to circle around behind here and cut off two highways. There's one right here and another one here. And this is one of the major ones right here, just to the western side of Pokrovsk, where a lot of military equipment comes into the city, where Ukraine is heavily defending it right now. The Russians have been trying to circle around behind, cut off those shipping lanes there. So far, what we've been hearing is on the southwestern side over here, Ukraine's been launching a lot of counteroffensives. So now what we're starting to hear is the Russians are retreating in that area. So that's very big news. Looks like Ukraine is gaining the upper hand near Pokrovsk right now, and the Russians have not been advancing closer to Pokrovsk. Now, for Mosa Defender, air raid sirens are currently sounding across Ukraine, including in the capital of Kiev, as Russian President Vladimir Putin's 30-hour Easter ceasefire ended at 12:01 a.m. Monday, April 21st. Earlier today, Ukrainian President Zelensky proposed a 30-day ceasefire for long-range drone and missile strikes against civilian infrastructure, but it appears that will not happen anytime soon. Okay, so these were the air raid alerts going across Ukraine, central and eastern Ukraine, immediately after this ceasefire was over. And again, we can't really even consider this a ceasefire because Russia was still repeatedly attacking Ukraine. I mean, just minutes after the ceasefire reportedly went into effect, there was lots of reports across the front line. I mean, don't get me wrong, there was definitely a slowdown of attacks, but nonetheless, still attacks taking place across Ukraine. We reported that to you guys on Saturday. And yesterday, Ukraine's President Zelensky, he was also stating that the attacks were ongoing repeatedly all throughout Easter. It was just basically a slowdown of attacks, if anything. Okay, so this was a map showing the air raid alerts. And also, from next to the Easter truce declared by Russia expired at midnight, shortly after it ended, Russia launched a wave of Shahed drone attacks on Ukraine. Explosions were reported in Odessa, Dnipropetrovsk, and Cherkasy regions. In total, Russia launched 96 Shahed drones and 3 missiles. 42 drones were shot down, according to President Vladimir Zelensky. The Russian army violated the promised ceasefire 2,935 times in just 24 hours. Moscow has not responded to Ukraine's proposal for a full 30-day ceasefire following Easter and an extension of the truce to protect civilian infrastructure. Okay, so we're still waiting on Russia to respond, the civilian infrastructure truce, and maybe we'll see a 30-day extension of a truce here and ceasefire in this war. We know that Ukraine was calling for that nearly immediately within hours after this whole quote-unquote Easter truce was declared. But we had a picture here of somebody's home or sheds being damaged due to drone attacks last night from Russia. So immediately when this thing expired, right at midnight, we already had Russia launching heavy attacks with drones onto Ukraine. Now, from War Translated, the Russian Ministry of Defense announced the end of the Easter truce, which it itself failed to follow. In its statement, Russia accused Ukraine of allegedly violating the ceasefire by carrying out over 4,900 attacks using artillery and drones. On the morning of April 21st, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, citing a report from Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces Oleksandr Syrsky, noted that enemy forces violated the ceasefire promise 2,935 times. Additionally, the enemy launched missile and drone attacks on Ukraine, affecting several regions across the country. So this was kind of the report here. We're not really going to go over this entire thing, but if you guys want to screenshot that and read it yourself, you're more than welcome to. But basically just stating here that Russian Ministry of Defense stating that they've announced the end of this Easter truce, so attacks can now start getting going on its way again, and Russia's now going to be attacking Ukraine. We'll start to see Ukraine attacking Russia once again as well. And they're just kind of talking about all these ceasefire violations that were recorded on either side. But again, we know right away Russia was already attacking Ukraine. And on Saturday, I reported to you guys also that Ukraine's military was actually ordered to halt all attacks immediately right at the start of the ceasefire. And they would begin noting all the ceasefire violations by Russia, okay? So now moving on to Vice Grab 24, Zelensky gives an update on the Easter ceasefire. He says Russia broke it more than 2,000 times in the past 24 hours, 67 ground assaults, 1,355 cases of artillery shelling, 673 FPV drone attacks. However, he also said there were no air raid alerts today. Hence, this is a format of ceasefire that has been achieved, and that's the easiest to extend. Ukraine proposes to cease any strikes using long-range drones and missiles on civilian infrastructure for a period of 30 days with the possibility of an extension, okay? So I know we know this information, but just wanted to share with you the actual statement coming out from Zelensky today and him stating how many attacks were actually taking place during this ceasefire from Russia, okay? Now from Bliskovka, Ukrainian border guards did not feel the silence regime promised by the enemy for Easter, said the spokesman for the State Border Service of Ukraine, Andriy Demchenko. Even though the truce was supposed to last about 30 hours, the enemy continued to strike with artillery, MLRS, and also used drones in both the Sumy and Kharkiv region, Demchenko noted. In some areas, the enemy tried to conduct targeted assault operations. Yeah, so apparently even near like Sumy, there was attacks ongoing, is what I was hearing yesterday. The Russians were in some ways still carrying out ground assaults, even though there's not supposed to be attacking at all. It wasn't just aerial attacks and artillery, things like that, but some ground assaults were taking place, according to Ukraine's military. Also, now, from Ukrainian Review, Sabia, regarding the so called Easter ceasefire, we have still not heard Moscow's response to our proposal to extend the ceasefire to 30 days. Although there has been some reduction in combat activity yesterday and today, Russian forces have continued to attack Ukrainian positions. Russia's actions after midnight tomorrow and throughout the week will reveal Russia's true attitude toward U.S. peace efforts, and the 30-day full ceasefire proposal. Okay, so this was a statement also coming out from their foreign minister, Andriy Sybiha, also indicating that Russia was not halting their assaults onto Ukraine. Now we'll move on to some other updates from next to Ukraine buys radiation medicine from Israel in case of nuclear threat. The Times of Israel reported Israeli company Pluri has signed a contract with Ukraine's cord blood bank to supply PLX R18, a drug used to treat radiation sickness. Medication stimulates the production of platelets as well as white and red blood cells, which are typically damaged during radiation exposure. Under the agreement, Pluri will deliver 12,000 doses to Ukraine, enough to treat 6,000 people. The medicine will be stored in the cord blood bank and distributed to hospitals across the country if needed. So that's kind of scary to have to report here today. I mean, is Ukraine expecting that maybe they might get attacked from nuclear weapons? I mean, maybe it could be possible. And I think if nuclear weapons would be used, it would probably be tactical nukes over strategic. But maybe Ukraine is expecting something to go down here. Maybe something we'll see some sort of major turn of events in this war that might force Russia to start using nuclear weapons. Hopefully that's not the case, but Ukraine looks like they are preparing that, and Israel's helping them out with radiation medicine. Now from Max24, at about 7:20 a.m., Russian troops attacked Dniprovsky district of Kherson with artillery. There is wounded. Okay, so once again, Kherson region, or the city of Kherson, being attacked by artillery once again. This is what Ukraine is talking about in terms of these civilian attacks, okay? Especially Kherson just getting hammered lately. We talked about Kherson probably about 3 to 4 times last week, getting hit by guided aerial bombs and artillery. And it looks like it is still ongoing at this time. This was actually coming out today from Ukraine. So very sad, guys. This is in southwestern Ukraine in the Kherson region. Now for Max 24, intense fighting continues near the border in Sumy region and on the territory of Russia, says Oleksandr Syrsky, the commander of Ukraine's armed forces. Russian troops are trying to knock us out of the territory of Kursk region and seize the border territories of the Sumy region. So this is an update from Oleksandr Syrsky, and looks like he's stating today that there's heavy fighting ongoing on the border of Sumy right now. The city of Sumy has been getting hit a lot recently from aerial attacks from Russia. And right now, just heavy fighting ongoing. We know the Russians are actually trying to start a new offensive into the Sumy, Cherniv, and also the Kharkiv region. So that's why Russia's really trying to push Ukraine out of there. But as far as we know, Ukraine is still inside the Kursk region, and also inside the Belgorod region at this time. Okay, Ukraine's still fighting over there. Now for Max 24, EU considers stripping Hungary's voting rights, says The Guardian. EU countries are weighing whether to revoke Hungary's voting rights amid Prime Minister Viktor Orban's continued efforts to block aid to Ukraine. Okay, so more talk about Hungary now. And this was the report today. Orban's stance on Ukraine pushes Hungary to brink in EU relations. Member states are considering removing the country's voting rights after its attempts to stymie support for Kiev. Okay, so it looks like the EU is still trying to work towards stripping Hungary of their voting rights, so that way they could potentially get Ukraine into the EU. We've been hearing that Ukraine is being fast-tracked right now to get into the EU, so could they get in with the next few weeks or maybe the next few months? I guess it's possible, but we know that Hungary has been heavily pushing to try to prevent any aid for Ukraine and also them getting into the EU. Now from Slava, Sweden has tanks, Finland has troops. Welcome to the Nordic Army. Reported today by the Wall Street Journal, the Nordic countries are transforming form symbols of peace to models of European defense cooperation amid threats from Russia and doubts about continued U.S. support under Trump. The Nordics are quietly building Europe's most cohesive regional army. Finland is mobilizing 280,000 troops. Sweden is building top-of-the-line tanks and planes. Denmark is increasing defense spending by 70% amid concerns about U.S. unreliability. Norway is doubling aid to Ukraine. Sweden is joining NATO surveillance operations. As distrust with Trump's U.S. grows, Nordic countries are preparing a Plan B, defending themselves with or without NATO. Countries launched a Nordic Air Force Joint Command in 2023 and a roadmap for defense integration under the auspices of Nordefco until 2030. Okay, so it's a big update coming out from the Nordic nations. This would be like Sweden, Finland, probably even a little bit of talk about the Baltic nations as well. I guess we could include in this because we know recently that Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, Finland, all these countries over here right on the border of Belarus and Russia are heavily preparing for war in the future. They will be frontline nations in this war if this happens to kick off between NATO and Russia. And we know also they've been withdrawing from the Ottawa Treaty to enable them to place anti-personnel mines on the ground on the borders with Belarus and Russia. So we know, once again, just more reports coming out talking about this, that NATO is getting prepared for war with Russia, and especially these frontline nations. Now, for military news, Europe moves to from arms transfers to investments in Ukrainian defense industry, says the Washington Post. The EU is changing its approach to aid. Instead of sending ready-made weapons, countries plan to invest in weapons production directly in Ukraine. It's beneficial for everyone, cheaper for us, more opportunities for Ukrainians, and we also gain experience from them, said a European official. Okay, so Europe's starting to now invest in Ukraine's defense industry. I mean, this is huge. We already know this is going to happen. Once this war comes to an end, Ukraine will probably receive lots of investment in defense industries inside their nation. And also, yeah, it's definitely a huge opportunity for Europe to get some training inside of Ukraine, as well, as Ukraine's been fighting against one of what would be considered one of the most powerful armies in the world would be Russia, right? So yeah, heavy investments going into Ukraine here very soon, and also a huge opportunity from Europe. Okay. Now, from Cloud, Ukrainian air assault forces captured 9 Russian soldiers in the Kursk region. The POW, or prisoners of war, were provided with medical and psychological assistance. These soldiers surrendered and thus chose life over death on the battlefield. We call on other Russians to surrender and save their lives. Okay, so it looks like we have another group, Russian soldiers, that have been captured in the Kursk region by Ukraine. Take a look at this.
Чергове поповнення обмінного фонду. Ці 9 військовослужбовців Російської Федерації здалися Збройним силам України на Курському напрямку. Таким чином, замість смерті на полі бою вони обрали життя. Закликаємо інших військовослужбовців Російської Федерації. Здавайтеся в полон, зберігайте своє життя. Слава Україні! Героям слава! Чергове поповнення.
Okay, so more Russian soldiers surrendering to the Ukrainians. We've been seeing a lot of this in the Kursk region, and this is also more signs that Ukraine is not completely out of the Kursk region. They're actually still operating in there, as they were able to capture more Russian soldiers today, okay, or recently. Now, from next up, Putin signs law ratifying strategic partnership treaty with Iran. According to the document, if one of the parties comes under attack, the other must refrain from providing any assistance to the aggressor. Unlike a similar agreement between Russia and North Korea, this treaty does not include a clause on military support in the event of aggression against either party. Moscow and Tehran also commit to refrain from joining third-party sanctions against one another. Okay, so huge report today. Putin has signed this law, now ratifying the strategic partnership treaty with Iran. And I've been hearing also that Iran could be receiving Su-35 fighter jets here very soon also. But if you notice here, a big part of this, when it comes to Iran and Russia compared to Russia and North Korea, is a major clause in here is that if Iran ever comes under attack, Russia is likely not to come to their aid and back them, as we've been hearing recently that the U.S. could come and launch some strikes over there and destroy their nuclear facilities. So that's an interesting development. So there is some sort of partnership going on between Iran and Russia, but it's a little bit different compared to how things are working out with North Korea. Now, for more translated, a rare Russian reconnaissance strike UAV forepost worth approximately $7 million was taken down by a Ukrainian FPV drone, or $6,000, at an altitude of 4 kilometers. The drone was searching for targets during the Easter truce as it was carrying 2 CAB-20 bombs. After being hit by the FPV drone, the UAV glided down into Russian territory. Okay, so $7 million UAV drone that's used for reconnaissance on the Russian side was taken down by a $6,000 FPV drone. Isn't that crazy, guys? this just shows how effective Ukraine's drones are, okay, and how they've been able to utilize just such cheap drones to destroy expensive equipment on the Russia side. We've seen this repeatedly. So this is kind of a picture of one of those drones that the Russians use that would have been destroyed and crashed into Russian territory. So huge news today. Now from Bliskovka, the SSU detained a traitor who set video traps to adjust Russia's strikes on Ukrainian armed forces echelons in the Cherniv region. After documenting the agent's crime step by step, she was detained red-handed when she was installing a video camera near I'm going to struggle to pronounce this, but I think it's Liznytsia facility. The offender is being held without bail and faces life imprisonment with confiscation of property. Okay, so this is an interesting development. We've been hearing about Ukraine's SSU capturing lots of people who are trying to carry out sabotage operations inside of Ukraine. So allegedly, looks like it was a woman here that was caught trying to place cameras or video traps to try to adjust Russian strikes, maybe letting the Russians know where their strikes are hitting and telling them to adjust to a different area to maybe hit buildings or Ukrainian installations for their military. So these were pictures just coming out showing this woman as she was captured, probably even trying to hide some cameras inside this box or something. Looks like this was one of the phones being used as well. So Ukraine once again capturing another attempt to sabotage operations for Ukraine's military. Now for Bliskovka, another accident with an oil tanker has occurred in Russia, leading to a spill of oil products in the Tartar Strait off the coast of Sakhalin. The Center for Public Affairs reports 3 months ago a similar accident with sea pollution occurred off the coast of Kamchatka, and the consequences of the accident that led to the sinking of 2 tankers in the Kerch Strait last December have not been overcome by the Russian authorities to this day. All of this is due to the inability of the Russian state to ensure proper maintenance of ships in the face of huge costs of the war against Ukraine and sanctions. So it looks like we had yet again another incident of an oil tanker, again leading to a spill of oil products. Okay, so this time in the Tartar Strait off the coast of Sakhalin. So I believe this is like far eastern Russia, if I'm not mistaken. And there was a report of a ship also near Sakhalin not too long ago that we had that actually got beached. I think it could have been a Chinese ship at the time, but there's just been so many reports, especially on the Russian side, where many of these ships are sinking and just sometimes their engines are going out as Russia's not able to maintain a lot of their shadow fleet of vessels that they use to circumvent sanctions, transport oil still. So yet again, guys, another report of another Russian tanker. Now for military news UA, Moscow Refinery April 2025 anti-drone net. Okay, so a new photo coming out showing the Moscow Refinery just completely covered with anti-drone nets to protect it. We know this is one of Russia's most important refineries, the Moscow Refinery, that has been attacked before and damaged. And we had reports that they lost, I think, hundreds of millions or even in the billions of revenue after it got attacked. This was several months ago. And yeah, this is a new photo coming out from there just showing all these anti-drone nets to protect this facility. Now from Anton Yurchenko on April 19th, which would have been 2 days ago, Ukrainian Air Forces carried out a strike on a Russian drone launch site in Kursk region of Russia, according to Ukraine's general staff. The site was used to prepare and launch reconnaissance, combat, and FPV drones. Up to 20 Russian drone operators were eliminated in the strike. Okay, so we had a Russian drone launch site in the Kursk region being hit probably with some sort of aerial bombs with Ukraine's aviation or their Air Force launching these strikes. And it looks like we had up to 20 Russian drone operators eliminated in this attack also. Okay, so this is one of the sites that Russia uses to launch drone attacks into Ukraine, located in the Kursk region recently, just 2 days ago. Now from the Ukrainian Review, monitoring channels write that the plane over Lviv region is presumably a Saab 340 AEW and C AWACS aircraft, waiting for confirmation. Okay, so what this whole report is about is we allegedly had some sort of aircraft being recorded over Western Ukraine, and many people were actually stating that this was actually a passenger jet. So we don't know exactly what it was, but it did have the call sign of welcome. So I thought that was interesting. But flight radar not indicating what type of aircraft this is. All we know is it's some sort of aircraft, maybe similar to a passenger aircraft, or was it some sort of AWACS plane? We've been hearing that Ukraine could be receiving these AWACS planes for quite a while now. These are actually from Sweden. These are aerial reconnaissance aircraft. like what you see right here in this photo. So was it one of these planes that were in the skies? Who knows? But there shouldn't be any passenger type aircraft in the skies over Ukraine, as right now there's like a no-fly restriction of the airspace over there. So we'll wait for more confirmation on that. If I get more information, I'll let you guys know. But is it possible it could be the Swedish Air Force over here with one of their AWACS planes? I guess it could be likely. Now we'll move on to Bliskovka. Air Defense Forces of Ukraine shot down 42 out of 96 Russian UAVs, and another 47 imitator drones were lost in the area. The enemy attack affected Kharkiv, Dnipropetrovsk, and Cherkasy regions. And he's got a little diagram here for us today to show how many drones were shot down. So we had 96 total going into Ukraine, 42 being shot down, another 47 probably brought down by electronic warfare. So definitely some attacks being reported today inside of Ukraine, but nothing too extreme from what I understand, as there wasn't too many videos coming out showing heavy damage. So thankfully, even though a lot of drones were entering into Ukraine, doesn't look like there was too much damage today, at least being reported on X. Now, from the Kyiv Independent, our last update of the day, guys. These are the indicative estimates of Russia's combat losses as of April 21st, according to the Armed Forces of Ukraine. All right, so final update. Russia's losses as of April 21st, 670 troops, 2 AFVs, 50 vehicles and fuel tanks, 2 tanks, 10 artillery systems, 30 UAVs, and it looks like that is it, guys. So definitely some of the smallest numbers I've ever seen. Which makes sense, obviously, because yesterday was supposed to be the Easter truce, but it does look like we still had some attacks from the Ukrainian side, as we had troop losses still being recorded here, 670, 2 AFVs being destroyed. Not too many vehicles and fuel tanks. We usually see 150 or more there. Only 2 tanks being destroyed, 10 artillery systems. So really not too much destroyed on the Russian side. I'm sure these numbers will jump back up again tomorrow. And we're probably going to see some heavy assaults onto Ukraine also, as the Russians had some time to prepare for more assaults in the future and probably extend and also improve their battlefield positions against Ukraine as well, okay? So I want to thank you guys very much for tuning in for this update today, again, on April 21st, 2025. And I hope you guys all have a great week this week. Let me know what you think about all these details down below in the comment section. That's going to be it for today's update. If you got something out of this, please smash that like button. Also, if you enjoy my content, please consider subscribing down below. Hit the notification bell. That way YouTube can notify you. With that, hope you all have a great day. Everybody take care and God bless, and we'll see you in the next one.